What is going on, y'all? And what a fun day of playoff basketball. That was a lot of fun. I had a blast. Let me know. Paul Blunt saying, "Man, I love those strings." Me too. Me too, actually. I'm a big strings guy. Playoff day one is done in the books. Play-ins are settled. Our round one matchups are settled. Our predictions are not quite settled yet, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about 4 games today. We'll touch briefly on the Sacramento Kings getting bounced in the play-in by the Pelicans, and we will obviously talk about the meltdown that was the Chicago Bulls and what goes forward from there. The structure of this live will be that this is a Raptors podcast, but the Toronto Raptors, last I checked, are not in the play-in or the playoffs, and we can't talk about our beloved Dinos too much other than the context of what they might do at the trades, within free agency, and with the draft. And we'll do a lot of that. But I do think that times like this, it's nice to watch other teams play basketball because it does give you a vision for what works. I'm sure that Darko Rajakovic and his staff, Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster, Dan Tolzman, all those people, I'm sure they're watching some of these games and taking notes on what seems to be working. So I think that sometimes watching other teams play basketball and trying to see which teams struggle, why they struggle, etc., especially when those teams have so many parallels to how you play, can be very helpful. One team that often gets compared to the Raptors is the Sacramento Kings because of the movement and the motion offense in which they have implemented all these off-ball cuts and, having a not so typical superstar star in De'Aaron Fox, coupled with a not so typical, triple double machine like DeMontis Sabonis, and yeah, how much all of that kind of went away, even in a matchup against a team that was playing without its so-called best player, Zion Williamson. It's interesting in the game that Zion did play in the play-in which the Pelicans managed to lose to the Lakers. I do not think, despite his box score, that Zion was their best player that game. And I didn't think that they were going to miss him as much as the bettors and the odds makers in Vegas thought they were going to miss him. I really felt like the Pelicans were favored in that game. And yet when you see the Vegas odds, the Pelicans were not favored because I think that too often people fail to realize that in the playoffs, it comes down to your role players. And a lot of role players have been heroes already. Yeah, we're only one game in, but where would the New Orleans Pelicans be without that little firecracker, Jose Alvarado, one of my favorite players in the NBA? Just such a joy to watch that guy infuse energy and cheer up his teammates and pick them down. When they're down 10, he's screaming at them to keep going, and when they're up 20, he's screaming at them to keep going. That guy's relentless, and he's one of my favorite basketball players. And you probably wouldn't guess that by how much I shit on undersized guards, but he's probably my favorite undersized guard in the NBA. There was an undersized guard who played today who struggled mightily, and that was Jalen Brunson. We'll definitely talk about that. But the New Orleans Pelicans do advance, and Zion's injury remains somewhat of question. There's another player, of course, Milwaukee, without Giannis Antetokounmpo, and I think that's going to be for the first round. I saw the injury. I heard a lot of stuff about people who suffered through something similar, and it doesn't seem like he's going to come back. So there's a very good chance that Pascal Siakam and the Indiana Pacers actually do advance past the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks, who, by the way, aren't very good. Milwaukee Bucks, who are coached by a guy who is infamous and incredible at losing playoff advantages like Doc Rivers, and is quite frankly, one of my least favorite coaches. So I do think that the Pacers will have a second round date with destiny, and it remains to be seen. So let's start at the beginning of the playoffs. Up, we would not be remiss. We'd be remiss if we not talk about the heroics of Tyler Hero and the Miami Heat, and in terms of beating the Chicago Bulls. I was rooting for DeMar there. I really was. As much as I love Heat culture and love Eric Spoelstra and everything, I just felt like I would love to see DeMar actually vanquish his playoff demons. And I don't know. Yeah, it's a playoff, destiny with, a date with destiny. And you're going to face off against the probably Eastern Conference contender in the Boston Celtics. But I would have loved to see Alex Caruso and that gang of, incredible role players who've gone through so much this season, and they're missing so many players. Patrick Williams, Lonzo Ball, they're missing Zach LaVine. I mean, those are two and a half really, really good players. No offense to Patrick Williams and whatever contract he wants this offseason, but I mean, they're missing a lot. And DeMar worked really, really hard to get them there. And, watching that game, it was just so obvious to see that this might be the end for that core together. I don't know where DeMar goes from here, but to lose to a team like the Heat that were missing Terry Rozier and we're missing Jimmy Butler, I don't know how you come back from that. So I was wrong on that. I really did expect the Bulls to get through without Jimmy Butler, and, the Heat just out-schemed them. I think Bam Adebayo created a lot of advantages, even hitting threes now, which is just makes him totally unstoppable. And he's just always been one of those guys where you wonder if forced into a high volume situation like Jaren Jackson was this year, would he be incredible? And I actually suspect he would be incredible. He's so gifted. I just feel like with the Heat, he's never really been forced into that number one option role. But could he potentially steal a game for you in Boston? I'm banking on it. I don't expect the Heat to go out and get swept. I don't expect them to get blown out by 30 points. I expect the Heat to compete. They were incredible defensively. The Bulls couldn't do anything. And it was at that point that Billy Donovan decided to do something crazy, which was he put Andre Drummond on the court. And from that point on, the game was over. It was like 4 dumbass plays in a row, and you just could not withstand that. So the Heat will go into Boston as severe underdogs. Most people expect them to get whooped by 30 to 40 points every single night. It does help that the Boston Celtics have a bit of a history with the Miami Heat, given the fact that the Heat were the team that beat them last year. However, I will say that the Boston Celtics are also a team that is kind of infamous for playing down to their competition. And playing the Heat without Jimmy Butler, especially if Jimmy Butler is not right for game one, which I suspect he won't be, that could be one of those situations where maybe, just maybe, the Boston Celtics show their immaturity. I doubt they would lose the game, but I feel like they could get surprised a little bit. So that's just my take. I feel like the Heat have nothing to lose. They're absolutely a well-coached team. In my opinion, they're a better coached team. I think Eric Spoelstra will coach circles around Joe Mazzulla, and I think he has in the past. So they'll have the game plan. They have the role players. They have the defenders. They have some offense, but not enough offense to compete with what the Boston Celtics can do. So if the Boston Celtics show up, it will be a blowout victory, and it will be a clean sweep or like a 4-1 series. But I think the Heat can surprise them more for one game, catch them napping once. Maybe it'll be the first game in Miami or something, but I don't know. KL07 saying, I can see Jaime Jaquez dropping 30 tomorrow. I can't, but let's hope for him that he does, because I think the Heat could really use that offensive firepower from somewhere. They're starving for it. I don't know where they're going to get it from, but let's see where the health, gods lead the Miami Heat. I would love to see a competitive series between those two teams. I'd like to see Boston at least get tested. But right now, seeing their side of the bracket, it looks like it's going to be a complete cakewalk to the Eastern Conference Finals for the Boston Celtics right now. They are so clearly the best team in the Eastern Conference. It's really not even funny. Teams that you could make an argument for: Milwaukee, not healthy; Sixers, not ready; and Cleveland, not good enough, and not connected enough, and the New York Knicks just no. So it's not going to happen. So why do we play this anyway? You know. Okay, so let's talk about the playoffs, and let's start with the first game, the game that not Donald Fagan saying has no interest in watching, and that is the Cavs Magic, and probably the series that has a lot of, in my opinion, Raptor parallels, because not only are the Magic a team that the Raptors are often compared to, alongside, of course, the Oklahoma City Thunder, etc., for their youth core, etc. There isn't really a traditional Class A superstar that they're building around. They're building around Paolo. I don't think he's on the level of an Anthony Edwards or a Victor Wembanyama. You can disagree with that. I tell you, you're crazy. And the Raptors, of course, in my opinion, are building around one of those types of players, but a lot of people in the NBA feel like they're not. A lot of people feel like Scotty and Paolo is tomato tomato. I don't feel that way. And today, I think you saw why. 9 turnovers for Paolo Banchero was not fun. Okay, let's just put it that way. Let me pull up the box score here, and we'll just talk about the game briefly. I think the most interesting game was probably Philly, New York, Lakers, Denver. I think those are the two games that we're probably going to spend the most time about talking about specific schemes and what can be done, and all the parallels. But I do want to touch on this because I do think it's important. Okay, so in terms of you know look, the Magic's offense has been atrocious. Half court offense, especially, has been atrocious. They have the worst half court offensive rating of any of the 20 teams that qualified for the playoffs or the play in. They are sincerely just a defensive team. That's not even disingenuous to say they're literally one of the most horrendous half court offenses in the NBA. Why are they so bad? They are so bad because they run their offense primarily through a guy who isn't very good at offense, and they bolster their overall success on defense, of which he is the worst player in his starting lineup. Paolo Banchero is, in my opinion, severely overrated. Why do I feel this way? I feel this way for a ton of reasons. Shot making is important. I get that. Brandon Ingram, where would the Pelicans be without Brandon Ingram? Brandon Ingram is a much better player than Paolo Banchero. Banchero is a young player, so I think that people give him a lot of leeway in terms of that. But 9 turnovers today, it's just a symptom of going up against length. So I'm not writing off Paolo Banchero as a player. Obviously, he's got a really bright future, and I hope for the Magic's sake that he grows into a better first option. I just don't think he's a first option. I'm not really sure he has the skill set to be a second option. So he is, in my opinion, just a way better version of Cade Cunningham, which is to say that he's the type of player that I really wouldn't want to be building an entire organization around. Luckily for the Magic, they're not really building their success around Paolo Banchero. He's just someone who's a part of their success. Their success is built on their defense, and their defense is truly, truly incredible. And it's hard to argue that their defense would be anywhere without guys like Jonathan Isaac and Jalen Suggs, who are incredible. But you know who else is really incredible defensively? Franz Wagner. Their entire team really commits to that end of the basketball court. They saw it. We saw it a little bit last year, although they didn't make the playoffs last year. They upset the Raptors twice. They upset the Boston Celtics. They played really competitive against the Clippers. Like, they surprised a ton of people last year before falling off. And there was a spurt there where you could see the makings of what could be a really good defensive team. So they're hanging their hat on defensive identity and hoping that maybe someday one of these young players can grow into a superstar. I'll tell you right now, that player is not going to be Jalen Suggs. He's not going to grow into a superstar. But he is, however, going to have to be a lot better than 1 for 7 from three. He was really abysmal today. Defensively, he does what he does, and that's consistent with him. But between Gary Harris and Jalen Suggs, to get 1 for 12 from three, this is no wonder they struggled to score. However, they did keep the Cleveland Cavaliers under 100 points, so the defensive effort did work to some extent. They're just going to have to find a way to put points on the basketball court. Donovan Mitchell had a pretty efficient night, 11 for 21. Or I keep saying night, but it was an afternoon game. Darius Garland goes off for 14. I think they got a pretty balanced attack. They didn't get really a lot from the bench. I think Karis LeVert and George Niang are going to have to provide a little bit more, especially if some of those shots start falling for the Magic. I don't think that this is going to be a sweep at all, you know, but it does stand to reason that at some point, one of these teams is going to have to break out in a big way. And I just think in that case, I put my money on the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have by far the best player in the series, which is Donovan Mitchell. And I got into a lot of beef this year with people debating Donovan Mitchell versus Devin Booker. And I think today I really, really feel very vindicated on that. Like Donovan Mitchell is head and shoulders better player than Devin Booker, in my opinion. Well, let's not say head and shoulders better, but he's a better player. And let's move on to our next game, which I think was just way more interesting. And that was the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Phoenix Suns. And honestly, guarding Kevin Durant with Karl Anthony Towns was a bold decision by Chris Finch. And I think it paid off largely because I don't think Kevin Durant is selfish enough necessarily to really exploit what that was. I mean, he did score his 31 points, but that was 31 of 95 points overall. I think there's a big credit to the Minnesota Timberwolves and what they're able to do defensively in terms of swallowing up middle and forcing the Phoenix Suns to play this sort of isolation, one-on-one, two-on-two type of action. There's nothing really complex about how the Phoenix Suns play basketball. On the other end, they can't really stop very many people. They have defensive liabilities all over the place, and it really didn't help that Grayson Allen kind of sprained his ankle. And then now I don't know what his status is for the rest of the series. Probably would have been a good thing to check on that. Royce O'Neal, he did his thing, right? Came over from the Brooklyn Nets, and he hit 4 threes, and he was very, very welcome. But they didn't get anything else anywhere, right? They're not really getting a ton from their bench. Eric Gordon goes over. He goes 0 points, 21 minutes. He's not the greatest defender. He's not a defensive liability, but he's not the greatest defender. He's not really doing enough for you. And you're going 7, 8 deep. Drew Eubanks, like there's just not enough depth on this team, really, honestly. And watching that, watching that third unit come in with Bull and Thaddeus Young, old man Thad, Raptor legend Thaddeus Young, it was just evident to see that even on the third unit, they don't have anyone that they could really promote. And need I remind you that just we are 7, 8 months removed from people legitimately with a straight face saying that Victor Wembanyama and Bull was no big diff. Holy shit, it's a big diff. And really, it just comes down to the other guys, right? Playoff defenses, especially a defense as talented and as capable as the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are number 1 in the West for freaking good reason. Sorry, number 3 in the West for a very good reason. They were number 1 in the West for most of the season. They're really good. And despite playing a player like Karl Anthony Towns, because Anthony Edwards is so committed on the defensive end, you get like performances like this where they can just swallow up an entire team. Guarding guarding Kevin Durant with Karl Anthony Towns and sort of like putting some of their lengthier defenders and just trusting that matchup alone was not going to kill you is a really good idea because they held the other two parts of that trio to a very limited showing. And it really came down again to those quote unquote other guys, right, contributing defensively. And I think that it really helped that Rudy Gobert is just such a menace inside. Like there was a story that they were talking about on the broadcast where, and I seriously suggest that everyone do this, where he went on this retreat after last season and he was just silent. Like it was just like they take away your phones and everything. And he just got one-on-one with himself. What a transformation from Rudy Gobert, a couple years ago, and people saying like, "Oh my God, like they overpaid the farm for this guy," to what he is right now, which is a defensive anchor with a legit chance at an NBA Finals. Like, I'm not saying they can. I'm not saying they will beat the Nuggets. I'm just saying if there is a team in the West that could beat the Nuggets, it's this team, especially if Karl Anthony Towns can be like some version of an all-star. He's been an all-star type talent before. If he can just start knocking down shots and take them on higher volume, and Mike Conley, who's not really like a great defender, he really showed up today. I think, there's just not enough for Phoenix. Yusuf Nurkic is not really great in terms of coverages. I think Anthony Edwards just really exploited some of their weaker defenders. Bradley Beal, Yusuf Nurkic, Kevin Durant is an okay defender at this point. But get him out in space, and he has trouble. And KD is one of my all-time favorite players, but as a playmaker, sometimes he really struggles. And so, you do run into certain situations where he's a little loose with the basketball. He gets into trouble in tight quarters with turnovers and passing and stuff. And so, yeah, like you could make a legit case that the best player in this series is Anthony Edwards. You could also make a case that the best player in this series is Kevin Durant. I'm not really sure which side of the aisle I fall on right now, but I am very sure that the better team won this game and by a large margin. Some injury concerns, of course. Kyle Anderson did not return to the game. We'll see if he's going to be healthy, but Naz Reid, man, whew, that dude, right? He is just an incredible value for what they're paying him. And Nikhil Alexander Walker, Canadian boy, he was enormous off the bench. His defense was awesome. 18 points. Again, as I keep saying, it's the other guys. These are wins on the margin, right? Where did Nikhil Alexander Walker come from? He came from a trade. He was a throw-in, right? In that trade. He wasn't the biggest part of the trade. He was a toss-in that trade. Jaden McDaniels, he was incredible tonight. His defense, like he is just like what he and Gobert are able to do gives me like shades of like it's suffocating what they're able to do to an opponent's offense. And again, with a team like the Phoenix Suns who can initiate their offense from three different places, the problem with the Phoenix Suns is the offense that they're initiating is all the same. They have three versions of basically the same type of player, which is a mid-range isolation scorer. They don't have a lot of off-ball cutting. They don't really have a ton of screening or, like they don't have a dynamicism in their offense. And so everything becomes very stagnant, right? And they're going to have to figure that out. They're going to have to find a way to get Kevin Durant to kind of collapse the defense, get in the paint, pitch out, go corner, reinitiate the offense through somebody else. And it's just the problem is that he just is not skilled enough as a playmaker to do that. He's not an offensive engine type of guy. And I think that's something he's always sort of struggled with. And it does sort of point to some of his playoff failures as well, is that he's not Luka, he's not LeBron, he's not a guy that you can just feed 48%, 50% usage to for one game and just be like, okay, carry us. You know what I mean? Like he's had those big moments before, but it's just like with someone like Kawhi. It's just not his thing. Kawhi is not gifted enough as a playmaker. DeMar is not gifted enough as a playmaker. Obviously, Kevin Durant is a slightly elevated scorer compared to those guys, but they're not enough by themselves where their passing and playmaking is enough to just say, okay, every single time down the court, we're giving it to this guy, and he's just going to draw the second defender, make the accurate read, initiate the offense, collapse the defense, and find us a good look every single time. Because really, it is just chess. It's chess all the time. You have 24 seconds from the moment you inbound, touch the ball to generate a good look. And really, opposing coaches are going to leverage and they're going to bet that you cannot generate enough high quality looks. And then there's just an element of luck to that, right? So if I'm going to double Kevin Durant, I'm going to play into their favor. If I'm going to put Jaden McDaniels on to Kevin Durant, I'm probably going to play into their favor because, yeah, I'm going to take him out of the game, but then I'm going to get somebody else going because he's going to be able to, he's a very unselfish player. He's going to be able to get Devin Booker going. So it's like, you got to pick your poison, right? And sometimes people are going to be like, they're going to look at a game like this and say, Devin Booker's trash, or Bradley Beal's trash, not realizing really that the game plan was to make those guys struggle, right? And it's always going to come down to that. It's like even a guy like Jalen Brunson, right? And it's like people might look at a guy like Deuce McBride or Miles McBride / Deuce McBride. You might see guys like Deuce McBride and Josh Hart like really, really like thriving today, right? They went off, right? And you might see a guy like Jalen Brunson just struggling mightily. Like he's getting blocked from the back by Tyrese Maxey. We're seeing him turning the ball over. We're seeing him missing point blank shots. And you might say to yourself, hey, is Deuce McBride like better? Or is Josh Hart better? And to that, I say, you're not really seeing the whole point of this, which is the entire Sixers defense is geared towards stopping this one guy. Nick Nurse is obsessed with this. He's an egomaniac to the extreme. He loves shutting down other team stars. We saw this, right? Ironically, Embiid, who is on his team now, commented on this, that he is more interested in shutting down a star than he is in winning the game. And that habit hasn't really gone away. And he's done a good job. And today he did a great job. And they left Josh Hart wide open. Well, you know what? Like, you're going to gang up on Jalen Brunson. You're going to make him super uncomfortable. You're going to put the Knicks out of their comfort zone in terms of that. But guess what? The jig is up. Everybody knows you're going to do this, right? And so really it's going to come down to the other guys. That's the theme of this whole freaking podcast. It's just coming down to the other guys. So let's talk about the other guys in terms of this. And just quickly, just take a look, and it just comes down to like the other guys winning the margins, right? It just comes down to that. Here, look at the team stats here. In terms of team stats, like you're gonna see 13 more shots for the Timberwolves, right? They're winning the offensive rebound battle 13-3. Like that's on guys like Yusuf Nurkic and but I mean like the Timberwolves are huge. They're enormous, right? And they're putting Karl Anthony Towns out on Kevin Durant, and they're allowing Rudy Gobert to just roam the paint, and he's just gobbling up rebounds. And on the other end, you're going to have him like being a pest for offensive rebounds, which is exactly what they did. And they're just playing the numbers here, right? 52-28 rebound advantage, 26-16 assist advantage. The team that consists, I mean, honestly, which of these teams reminded you of which? I think today the Timberwolves played like a very wishful version of what I hope the Raptors will be. And the Phoenix Suns played like a really shitty version of what the Raptors played like last year, right? Not a ton of movement, a lot of one-on-one, a lot of my shot, your shot type of shit. It just doesn't work. This is not like 1982 anymore. There are a lot of coaches that just believe in putting the ball in this guy's hand and just saying, "Okay, you go get it." And Nick Nurse is that type of guy, right? But I'm just saying, like, more and more we are seeing on all levels of basketball, the movement is winning. Look at the college level, right? South Carolina, the women's side, they preach movement. Everything is about movement. Everything is about finding your teammate. Everything is about playing egoless and playing for each other. UConn on the women's side as well. They were very successful this year. They play the same way, even though they have the best player in college basketball in Paige Beckers. Take it to the men's side. The UConn Huskies, the men's team. I mean, that team is selfless as hell. There's no ego on that team. It doesn't matter who gets 20, who gets 30. In Europe, like this style of basketball is just that's just what you call basketball. So I do think that it's an encouraging thing if you're a Raptor fan to see your team leaning more into egalitarian basketball. Um, Moving over to the third game, which I thought was really interesting, which is the game that I alluded to, which is the Sixers versus the New York Knicks. So OG Anunoby, Kyle Lowry, Nick Nurse. I mean, this has got to be the one that a lot of Raptor fans are really paying attention to, right? And Kyle Lowry, even at this age, playing 39 freaking minutes. Like he was a castaway for the Heat. They thought he was such a big problem, right? And I thought that was a bad move. They paid a first round pick to downgrade Kyle Lowry. I don't think Terry Rozier is a better player than Kyle Lowry. Just saying. Maybe I'm alone on that. I think Kyle Lowry, even at this age, he helps you. He helps you in so many different ways. Yeah, he's not the same. His impact metrics have fallen off a cliff. He is, he's slower. He's whatever. But man, this guy just wins. Like he wins minutes. He is just like, he's a game manager. It's like a very, very shitty version of LeBron James. That's probably like a very nasty way to talk about Kyle Lowry, and maybe that's very rude. But LeBron has this cerebral way of just controlling the game. Jokic, there are guys like this. Halliburton, there may be like 15 guys in the league that I just consider to be that smart that they can just control the game with their mind. It's not like Scotty is in that area too. So I think Kyle is one of those guys. And the more he plays, the more you see that, like even at this age, that he is still able to be a meaningful contributor for this team. Also, Jeff Doughton is on their bench, and I'm torn because obviously I love Kyle Lowry and I love Jeff Doughton, but I cannot root for Joel Embiid. A little bit of instant karma for Joel Embiid today. Goes off the backboard to end, the first half, and the Sixers are on the ropes really at that point. And we can just even look at the game cast and you'll see. I think there was a point, it was like right around here, and he just goes down, and the way he looked, like he was staring up, it looked like, okay, he's done for the year. And then he comes back, and turns out that he's just had a lot of trouble trusting that knee. But he has not dunked much this year. This might be a career that is going to end at 31. I'm just being real. Like, you might be seeing, and I mean, let's just put personal biases aside. Joel Embiid is the best player in this series. It's not close. If you think it's close, it's because you're crazy. Joel Embiid is by far a better player than Jalen Brunson. Joel Embiid is by far a better player than OG Anunoby. Joel Embiid is by far a better player than the next two best players in this series. The gap between him and a combination of Tyrese Maxey and Jalen Brunson is just not even close. From a talent perspective and from an impact perspective, I think it's pretty easy to make a case that Joel Embiid is not only one of the three best offensive players in the NBA, he's also probably one of the two best defensive players in the NBA. I hate Joel Embiid. I can just genuinely tell you, I do not dislike one player in the league more than I dislike this dude for his antics, for his immaturity, for his constant, chirping and stupidity. But you have to respect the player that is. Like, you just have to. I'm told that, when I was a child, a lot of people hated Michael Jordan too. Joel Embiid is like to his sport right now about as close to whatever Jordan, Hakeem, those guys, Wilt were to their sport. He is leaps and bounds more talented than everyone else in the court. Don't believe the success and the failure, whatever. Like, it's just purely basketball. Forget the personal biases, forget the narratives, forget the playoff choking, all that stuff. I'm talking purely as a physics of basketball. This guy is fucking unstoppable. So why does he fail over and over? It's because for 1 to 2 minutes every single game, he loses his mind. I don't know why it is that he loses his mind. Hey, Muskoka Cottage Retreat with a super chat. That's really nice of you. Thank you so much for that. Was that for my relentless hating of Joel Embiid? Oh my gosh. My, oh, that's hilarious. Fred VanVleet, I feel bad for anyone who takes this clown seriously. Thanks, Fred. Uh, I won't say it. It's cool. Tell Aramis I say hi. I know it's not real, Fred, but if it were. Okay. Okay. That's funny. Where is this going on? No cap though. Van Fleet wins games. Fred VanVleet does win games. This channel has been oddly very complimentary of Fred VanVleet since he's left, but only once he left. Couldn't be complimentary of him while he was here, but I'm happy to see once he's left. Death 4K, Rob, you're overrating Joel's talent. Mentality counts and talent. Joel has consistently been soft. I don't think he was soft today. I think he just got outplayed, man. That's funny. RKERTV. If your favorite player is Tim Duncan, the player you'll hate most is Mr. Instant Karma, Joel Embiid. That's probably true. That's probably true, right? I just find him to be extremely mature, and I find that 2 to 3 minutes every single game, he just does stupid things like, from the clumsiness to the dirty plays. In my opinion, like, we can argue whether he meant to knee Mitchell Robinson in the balls, right? But anyways, there's a lot to talk about in this game, and it doesn't entirely come down to narratives about Joel Embiid and whether or not, but I just think that compared to the players in this series, he is by far the most talented player in this series. I'm not saying he's Michael Jordan, but I'm saying relative to the guys playing in this series, he might as well be Michael Jordan. He is that unstoppable. I've watched this guy play a lot, like over the last couple of years. I tell you, he is unstoppable. There's literally nothing he can't do on the basketball court, offensively, defensively. If he's healthy, if he's right, if his mind is right on any given night, he can be the best player in the world by far. There's nobody who can do the stuff that he can do in the NBA. I despise him, but it is fact. Fact is fact. Okay, he's that good. So how did the New York Knicks win? Well, they kind of won and they kind of lost. They won because they out-hustled the shit out of this team. They won because Joel Embiid, in my opinion, when he went out, there was just this crazy run that the Knicks went on. And they're lucky they did. Like this run right here for the Knicks, like that's the game. That they don't have that run, Joel Embiid doesn't go out, they don't win this game. The Knicks were horribly inefficient in the half court. Horribly inefficient. The Sixers were incredibly efficient. Well, I don't say incredibly efficient, but considerably way more efficient than the Knicks in the half court. But it really came down to, again, the role players. This theme is going to come up again and again, and it's definitely going to come up in the next series. But man, Tobias Harris, where are you? Right? Like, where are you, man? I mean, you've been making $30+ million a year for years now, and every time I see Tobias Harris, I hear Jimmy Butler's voice saying, "Tobias Harris over me." And I swear it's just every time consistent. I've never been a big Tobias fan. I've never really thought of him as a star player or anything like that. I never understood the contract that they signed him to, nor did I understand the contract they signed Al Horford to when they signed him to that contract. I don't think they get enough flack for that, but it's consistently been one of the worst contracts in the NBA, and they're probably very, 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 very happy that it is finally expiring. Kind of scary to think what may happen when that money is reallocated towards a player who actually deserves it. Who might that player be? We'll talk about that in our offseason primer, but I'm suspecting that player might be someone who's actually on the other side of the court right now, which is maybe OG Anunoby reuniting with Nick Nurse in Philadelphia. Could that be something? It could also be Paul George. So again, it can't be worse than Tobias Harris is what I'm saying. And he has been invisible for a lot. And I'm sure he'll have a game this series where he puts up 25 points, but it was bad today. Tyrese Maxey was my player of the game for sure on the Sixers side. I thought he was incredible. His defense, he's not known as a good defender. He's always been known as a bad defender, a bit of a defensive liability, but I saw just a guy who guarded his ass off. At least relative to expectations. I'm not saying like he was Gary Payton out there, but he was just incredible. A real revelation. He played all but 4 minutes. He was the minutes leader. And every time they put the ball in his hands, there's nothing the Knicks could do. And the Knicks are a really good defensive team with a ton of paint protection. They have bigs inside like Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein, whose entire goal is to deter drives and finishes at the rim. And he was just on a different wavelength. So Tyrese Maxey is just once again proving that the playoffs and the bright lights just do not bother this guy. And, they have something in him. Like they have a real budding star. Like I trust his ascent more than I trust De'Aaron Fox's ascent. I trust his ascent more than I'm borderline trusting his ascent more than I trust Tyrese Halliburton's ascent. He has his limitations as a player, but as a scorer, he is just downright scary. To drop 33 points like this on a team, I mean, he was their half-court offense in so many ways tonight. Joel Embiid was downright incredible for his part as well. I think he really slumped later in the game because for whatever reason, I mean, obviously injuries can bother you, but he got to the line 12 times. I think there's a couple reasons that I could point to where Joel Embiid kind of faded down the stretch. And again, this was a really close game. Okay. New York was fully on the verge of losing this game. And you can make an argument that if Josh Hart and Deuce McBride do not shoot out of their minds, the Knicks are 0-1 right now. Easily. If Joel Embiid does not get injured, the Knicks are 0-1. The Knicks better wake the fuck up because they are facing a team that is better than them. And I'm being dead serious. The Sixers are a better team than the Knicks. The Knicks are a team that I root for more. They're a team that I like more. But the Sixers are by far the better team. And when this series goes back to Philadelphia, if Joel Embiid's health holds up, if the Sixers do not crater from within, if Joel Embiid's kind of weakish leadership does not exterminate, in my opinion, what the Sixers can be, expect this to be a 2-2 series really soon. For the Knicks part, I mean, do you see how they miss an RJ Barrett and an Emmanuel quickly a little bit? Sure. some might say, okay, well, they made up for it real quick with Deuce McBride, right? And McBride was incredible, 21 points, right? Josh Hart, 22 points, not known as a big time shooter. He's a guy who consistently, has shot 30, 31%, 32% from three. They're willing to live with that. They're playing the odds that Josh Hart three-pointers are not going to end them. And that's Nick Nurse's entire MO. Let the other team's role players go off, shut down the stars. And tonight, Deuce McBride, Mitchell Robinson, I don't think Dante DiVincenzo had a great game, but I think you can expect Deuce McBride to just play more minutes than Dante DiVincenzo going forward just because of his defense. And, Deuce McBride may just end up having the type of career that Fred VanVleet had. Ironically, we're talking so much about Fred VanVleet in the chat, and I was just thinking as he was raining threes, is is Nick Nurse really just being undone by the next Fred VanVleet? Obviously, a slightly taller player, but another guy who just has a lot of defensive pop in McBride and really wasn't given much of a look as an NBA player, but is proving himself to be a very competent NBA player due to the opportunity created by Emmanuel quickly moving on. And I have just been a really big fan of Deuce McBride all season. He's just big time cojones. He's playing meaningful minutes for the first time in the playoffs, and he's showing up. And he is, outplaying guards who are frankly just. And I don't think Jalen Brunson needed to force the issue as much as he did. And 8 for 20, 8 for 26, like he really almost cost him this game. And I think we've seen good Jalen Brunson in the playoffs before, so this is not some sort of narrative or anything about Jalen Brunson. All I know, next game he's going to go off for 35 points. But this is kind of a knock on understanding like how they're playing you. Like they blitzed him hard, and he got trapped. He had 5 turnovers tonight. I just don't think that he played well. They won their minutes without him, right? Like he was a negative tonight, and it really came down to Deuce McBride being plus 37, bro. Plus 37. They won. Like he won them this game. He just became a New York legend because I tell you, if they go down 0-1 in this series, they don't come back. Like this is one of those series where you do have to maintain home court if you're the Knicks to win. If you're the okay, like give you an example. There's a Twitter account called NBA Math, and they have this brilliant mathematical formula to break down what happens in a series once a team wins a game or loses a game. And they go down and they break down based on the strengths and weaknesses of a particular team, their estimate on what would happen if one team went up, one team went down. There are certain teams where even down 0-2, they have a very, very good chance of winning the series. And there are certain teams where down 0-2, the series is over. And the Knicks are one of those teams where I believe down 0-2, this series would be over. So they avoid disaster by going down 0-1 because I think the series favors, like it's very like a 55-45 type of series, slightly favoring the Sixers, in my opinion. The minute a home team loses a game, this series just ends for me. So a lot of pressure on the Knicks to win game 2. If Joel Embiid is healthy, I think it's a very good chance this could be a 1-1 series. Precious Achiuwa did not play today. Thought that was interesting. Mitchell Robinson was incredible. I do want to talk briefly about him. Joel Embiid is, as I've already said, all the wonderful things about Joel Embiid. And one of the reasons that he's so great is because he's basically like a 7'1", 280-pound guard. In terms of his skill set, it's very Kobe-esque. Again, I'm saying a lot of crazy stuff in this live that's probably going to get clipped out of context, but please understand, like his footwork is legendary. His offensive package, his set of counters, some of his footwork on his turnarounds, he is really one of the most skilled big men I've ever seen in my life. Offensively, he is truly, truly magnificent to watch and just study. Can't stand the guy. I've said it 5 times. I can't stand the guy. But he is truly that good skill-wise. So much of what he does is unstoppable because of physics. The physics of stopping him is very hard. If you back off of him, he will shoot over you, and you will not contest back because of his high release point. It's like Rasheed Wallace, but like way, way, way better. If you get close to him, he is crafty enough and shifty enough to pull through you, and you'll be fouled out within 4 minutes. So really, the concept of trying to stop Joel Embiid one-on-one is something that has eluded people for forever. The Raptors were able to do it to a previous version of Joel Embiid with a defensive genius, which was Marc Gasol, who's probably going to be a Hall of Famer someday. Um, he's gotten like 3 times better since that player. So really, like the Raptors, the last time they faced Joel Embiid, like the stuff that he was doing to them, despite the fact that you know, they had defenders around him. They had an OG Anunoby. They had Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes. They had all these lengthy defenders, and they had Nick Nurse, scheming and doing crazy stuff to stop him. It's not that easy because of the physics of trying to stop this guy. You'll foul out your whole team. Mitchell Robinson presents a very unique strength for the Knicks in that he actually does have the size and length to bother him. And he's just quick enough that if Joel Embiid is not 100% right, and I think that that's where the second half, a lot of people are going to give way too much credit to Mitchell Robinson. And they're like, oh, look at the length of Mitchell Robinson to really, really stop Joel Embiid. It's like, yeah, sort of. But also Joel Embiid not being 100%, maybe thinking a little bit too much, it does impact your jumper. It does impact your aggressiveness. It does impact, how willing you are to jump. There were a lot of rebounds that he just kind of let fly over his head, and he just wasn't himself. I understand it. I get it. At the same time, it sucks because we saw this with Kawhi Leonard with the Raptors, where every dunk was like, hold your breath, hold your breath. Like every time Kawhi went up and came down on those knees, it was just like, is that going to be the end? And it's scary when basketball becomes that way, where, and I'm not really sure what the solution is. Sometimes it's just luck with 7-foot guys, 7'1" guys who have so much weight. It's just luck, Bill Walton, the history of the league, Ralph Sampson, who else? Sam Bowie, Greg Oden, Joel Embiid, like Anthony Davis, but he's been relatively healthy. There's a lot of big guys, and of course, in the case of Arvydas Sabonis, you just go down, and it's a miracle whenever someone who's 7 feet can even move around the basketball court. So yeah, I understand all the concerns people have about Victor Wembanyama now, but Victor Wembanyama is a completely different type of athlete. But yes, the taller you are, the physics of it just dictate that it's not going to be easy to be healthy. And once you realize that you're that tall, you're gonna have to do a lot of extra work to keep yourself healthy and mobile and loose and in shape. And I just feel like sometimes Embiid he's very reckless with his movements. Not a fan, even though I admire his skill level. I'm not a fan of how he plants sometimes, how he lands. He's just very clumsy. And I feel like that is something I never say about Victor Wembanyama. He is not as clumsy. For someone who's so lanky, he's not as clumsy. So, anyways, I do think that Embiid, overthinking things a little bit after, that scare might have been the reason why the Knicks are escaping this series. Now let's talk about what was my favorite game for a lot of reasons, which was the Denver Nuggets versus the Los Angeles Lakers. Hold on, quickly, just look at the team stats here. Yeah, and you'll see it's all over, in terms of points in the paint was very much in the Sixers' favor. I can tell you half court offensive rating was drastically in their favor. Stocks were relatively even. Assists were marginally in the Knicks' favor. It really came down to rebounding, 55 to 33. Shot attempts, 91 versus 81. Isn't it interesting that a Nick Nurse team gets outshot in terms of out attempted? I don't think, because the talent gap is so much larger for the Sixers than it is for the Knicks. I don't think that the Sixers need to do to the Knicks what the Knicks did to the Sixers tonight. I don't think they need to out rebound them. I just think they need to retain it. I think they need to be even or close. So if that rebound advantage, I don't know, turnover advantage, possession advantage, I think that just needs to be close. It needs to be within 3%. If it's within 3%, the Sixers will win this series, no questions asked. If they consistently get outworked, which is what happened, Mitchell Robinson, Deuce McBride, Josh Hart, just outworked, out muscled, out hustled, out tried, diving for loose balls, like all this shit. It does come down to role players. It wasn't Jalen Brunson doing it. I'll tell you that. It's the role players. It's all those guys. And honestly, the Sixers collection of role players just is nothing compared to the Knicks collection of role players, especially with D'Anthony Melton out, who would be a really big change in this series for the Sixers, because it would allow Kyle Lowry probably to go to the bench and play more of a natural position as a stabilizing bench guard. But nevertheless, good luck to the Sixers. Good luck to Embiid, and I hope that he is healthy. I did sort of troll him on, or troll the situation a little bit on Twitter by posting a picture of Scotty Barnes, when Scotty injured his ankle on Joel Embiid's foot, and he was falling down and he was holding his head, and I said, "Get well soon, Joel Embiid." Sixers fans did not appreciate that little jab. Well, guess what? I did not appreciate him stepping on Scotty's foot and ending his playoffs. Um, okay. I'm still salty about that. Like I can't quite get over it. I'm sorry, man. I got to tell you though, one quick thing before we get to the Lakers Denver game. It is important to realize that the Raptors young core is so different than the OKC young core and the Magic young core for a couple of reasons. All these guys came up on winning teams. Those guys came up on losing teams. There is a difference. Like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has not been tested in deep playoff series. Understand that. RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley have been to the playoffs. They've had failures. They've gotten it out of their system. And it is a very, very different thing to be hit for the first time with playoff intensity. Ask Paolo Banchero in his 9 turnovers today. It is a completely different level of physicality, especially if you go up against a team that's taking it very seriously and has an advantage over you. Like the way that teams just hone in on you, like 82 games, like teams are not showing you their best. Okay. Very rarely, unless it's a rivalry, unless it's a back to back, are you going to start to see like teams really zero in on your weaknesses. There's generic game plans. But once you have like a week and a half to prepare for another team, especially their star, and which is what happens with young stars. We'll go through it next year or the year after with Victor Wembanyama when he goes to the playoffs and he has his 12 turnover game or something like that, and everyone starts freaking out. But I think that the reason that the Raptors were so hell-bent on trying to push for the play-in last year was because they wanted Scotty to get that second rep. And I think the misguided part of that was that he would have gotten that second rep as a role player. He wouldn't have gotten it as a star because of how the team was structured. But it will be very interesting, to see if his playoff poise and pizzazz retains or maintains as he moves up the level, right? Because there was a part of Masai Ujiri's press conference in which he said that we've nailed the hardest part. Like this was the hardest part, getting the star, etc. And I agree with that. I fully understand where he's coming from, and he's right. They have nailed the best and the hardest part of this entire equation, which is getting that star player. And the reason that star is so hard is because for the same reason that this game went the way it did. Because when you have a guy like a Jokic or a LeBron, like everything starts to collapse around them and everything's like on the other team. Like, how are you supposed to stop a Nikola Jokic? Well, this was something that Darvin Ham had to try to figure out on the fly um, for the second year in a row. And so far, not so good. Um, the Denver Nuggets come out in the first quarter. They look a little bit uneven, to say the least. Aaron Gordon doesn't play a hell of a lot, doesn't contribute a hell of a lot. Michael Porter gets a pretty quick hook early on. He played pretty much every minute from that point on, but he was very uninvolved and very unenthusiastic. Peyton Watson came in, one of my favorite players in the league, also just gave him a huge pop immediately. Not typically known as a guy who shoots or whatever, but he immediately got like a couple of threes to go. Airballed one, got the other two to go. He was really just a needed sustenance for that team, because they are not deep. They're playing DeAndre Jordan actual minutes in the NBA in 2024. They are not deep. Okay. And I don't know if like they need to fix that, because like Reggie Jackson wasn't great tonight. I didn't think the depth would be this big an issue, but it was tonight. you know, and I think the Denver Nuggets and the Lakers series kind of comes down to two versus two, right? And it's interesting. Jokic Murray, right? That entire duo and how they are, and Anthony Davis and LeBron James, right? And if you told me really like in a week and a half from now that the Lakers are winning this series like 3-2 or something like that, I'd be a little surprised, but I wouldn't say you're crazy, right? The Lakers do have the capability of getting hot, but this series is going to come down to two things really. Well, it's going to come down to three things. Number one, can Darvin Ham hold water as a coach against Mike Malone? Can he get close? Because it is a gap. It is a significant gap. And I wonder systematically, schematically, if that gap can be closed a little bit. You know, can he have a game plan that is going to at least make Nikola Jokic uncomfortable? It's hard, of course, because there's a lot going on in this series that I think is worth thinking about here. Number one is really the two versus two comes down to a three versus three on the other end, which is really you're talking about Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Kentavious Caldwell Pope against um, Rui Hachimura, D'Angelo Russell, and Austin Reeves. And tonight, the Denver trio was way better. They out rebounded them, they outscored them, they were just better. And they were better defensively, and they're bigger. And I think all these things combined matter. Um, I think it matters, in terms of like the scheme. Like you had to play Anthony Davis 45 minutes. Sometimes he got cross matched onto a shooter. And again, systematically, this hurts the Lakers because this makes you very, very small inside. Rui Hachimura and LeBron James are not going to be able to deal with Nikola Jokic. And so when you think about this from the Raptors perspective, having bigger bodies like Jakob Pertl, who seems by some people's standards to be completely useless, it's like, yeah, he's useless until you get into a series like this, in which you absolutely need a big who can actually rebound against the other team and provide a little bit of rim pressure, rim defense, and efficient scoring inside. Um, Especially defensively. Like that center to clog the middle and to keep guys off the glass is so important that when you don't have it, you see what happened with the Raptors, right? I wish they hadn't had to give up what they gave up to get it, but it is a good thing to have it on your team. And paying $20 million a year for that, it's not the end of the world. The Raptors overpaid Jakob Poeltl for sure, but not by a lot. We will definitely talk about Gary Trent Jr. towards the end of this as well, because I feel like we've been having a lot of crazy conversations with people about Gary Trent Jr. But nevertheless, in this game, I felt like the bench really was not there for the Lakers tonight, right? Gabe Vincent is easily one of my least favorite players in the league. And I just thought like it was one of the biggest reasons why I was a little bit thankful that Fred VanVleet took his time was allegedly the Raptors were interested in Gabe Vincent before they turned their focus over to Dennis Schroeder. And man, I cannot tell you how many words or how many essays I could write about why I did not want Gabe Vincent on the Toronto Raptors. Just not my brand of player, right? I'm not a fan. I didn't think he was great in Miami. I thought he was massively overrated by people because he was starting for that team over Kyle Lowry, which I thought was crazy. But I just do not like him as a player. And I just felt like tonight he was abysmal in his minutes. Spencer Dinwiddie came in and he was not good in his minutes. And it really doesn't help that D'Angelo Russell went 6 for 20. And I think like this game was really strange because it seemed like the Lakers had it, going into the half. The Lakers really felt like they had some serious momentum, and Anthony Davis was really doing a great job getting inside and just in general, like being unstoppable because people forget sometimes that he is a top 10 player in the NBA when he's healthy, and he's been healthy this year. He's a top 10 player. He might be a top 7 player in the NBA right now. He's a better player, pound for pound. He's a better player than a guy like Jason Tatum, right? Like he's a really good player. And we just don't give enough credit to Anthony Davis because I think the narrative on Anthony Davis being soft, injury prone, blah, 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 the last time he was healthy, they won a championship. Granted, it was in the bubble, but, he's been healthy this year. So, and granted, LeBron's a lot older this year, but LeBron's still capable of holding water. And I think tonight, Anthony Davis and LeBron were awesome. LeBron faded towards the end, and I wonder how much that had to do with his blow up with, you know, D'Angelo Russell, and the team just really was not the same after that. You can literally see exactly where this game flipped for them, and it was like right there, 67-67, and yeah, Denver pretty much was favored to win this game for the most part of the second half. But man, like this was close, and then it just wasn't. And then boom, and it was a lot of the other guys, right? LeBron's layup made it 75-76, and then it was KCP making a three, then it was Jokic making a 4-foot driving jump shot. Give this video a little chat. Give this a W if you caught Nikola Jokic pulling a Scotty Barnes on the fast break, giving a little look back there, and just like I thought it was hilarious. And then next thing you know, it's like a minute later, and it's 84-75. They never look back. So it's just like these little moments in the game in which you lose momentum. And it just comes down to maintaining your composure. And yeah, D'Angelo Russell definitely did make a mistake there. But LeBron did not have to be the way he was. And he pretty much refused to take a shot the rest of the game. Kind of reminded me of stuff he's done in the past, reminded me of something that Kobe's done in the past too. So I just did not like this game for the Lakers. If they had a chance to win this series, I think they just lost it on this game. That's probably a bold statement, but going down 0-2, it's going to be really, really hard to win 4 out of 5, right? It's kind of the sucky part about you do have to get one of these. Like if you're going to upset the defending champions where you don't have the best player, like, and they have the better role players, and they have like I don't want to say they have the better depth because I think both teams are very, very starter heavy, but like you can make a case that Reggie Jackson and like I don't know if you can make a case actually. Damn, these teams are thin as hell. Peyton Watson has slowly crept up, that chart, and he provides energy, and I think he gives that team a little bit of the dynamic, like a poor man's Aaron Gordon in a sense, right? Not going to shoot a ton, but he's going to be very active defensively. He had a game, I think the other day, where I think he had like 4 blocks, 5 blocks, something crazy like that. So he's active, but he's definitely not Bruce Brown in terms of just stability and steadying up that second unit. Luckily, as long as that starting lineup stays healthy, um, they don't need to go to the bench that much. And they stagger the minutes so that, Jamal Murray has a chance to run his unit, and he's just incredible. And I thought he was great tonight too. Despite somewhat cold shooting by standards, like 9 for 24, but he had 22 points. And I think he was very instrumental in big moments for them, just kind of like carrying those non-Jokic minutes. They've really struggled in non-Jokic minutes. But I think pulling Anthony Davis away from the basket was like their key, right? Like whenever they got that to happen, whether that was, Anthony Davis trailing on a switch and then, getting cross matched against, or like even like the transition defense, I think was very, very uneven for the Lakers. A lot of people have this theory that the Lakers, get a gifted whistle from the league, right? And they do because they have a lot of guys who foul bait a lot. And Anthony Davis is a foul merchant. And it's not quite to the extent of, guys like DeMar DeRozan, Pascal Siakam, James Harden, guys who just kind of like flail and then fall out of bounds. But Davis does it quite a bit, and he did it quite a bit tonight. The problem is when the refs start swallowing their whistles, now your team is just at a massive disadvantage. And the cross matching element, which is something the Raptors tried to eradicate last year by just going everything 6'9", it sometimes means that Anthony Davis is going to be tagging like Contavious Caldwell Pope or Michael Porter Jr. on the perimeter, which he did tonight. And that's not really a place you want Anthony Davis to be, just because he can be there. Like you have a switchable defender. Just because you can put him there on your defender doesn't mean he should be there. It just means he can be there. And if he is there and that guy misses a shot, well, then Nikola Jokic and Aaron Gordon are inside and you are outside, and they're just going to get offensive rebounds. And that's just really what it comes down to, right? It came down to teams. So I could say like almost every single game today that was won came down to a few factors. And if we try to draw a line through them, I think you'll find that every team that won the possession battle, right? Like, look at the Denver Nuggets, 102 shot attempts to 79. They crashed the offensive glass 15 to 6. They got 49 rebounds to 40. You know what I mean? Like, they limited their turnovers 6 versus 12, right? Points in the paint, they won that battle too. Like, for a team that only won by 11, they crushed every angle. And it just came down to, the Lakers shot better from the line. They got to the line more. They got to the line 19 times versus, the Nuggets getting to the line 6 times. When's the last time you saw a team go to the line 6 times and win a basketball game? You know, like, that's crazy. Like, they got outshot from the field too. The It's not like, the Lakers were incapable of creating good offense, despite D'Angelo Russell having a very, very cold shooting night. Like, this was 49%. They shot 49% from the field. I mean, the Denver Nuggets have a lot to clean up because they killed them on the offensive glass. They got way more possessions. They killed them on the turnover margin, and they still only won by 11. And I just want to be clear, in the third quarter, they were trailing. So, like, to be clear, it's not like the Lakers are trash. It's not like the Lakers are done. It's just the Lakers are going to have a hard time finding an opportunity where the Nuggets play this badly again. It's worth saying the Nuggets did not play great tonight. They had a lot of uneven performances. There's a lot of uncharacteristic stuff from them tonight in terms of cohesiveness. I've seen Reggie Jackson play a much better game than this. I've seen Christian Brown be much better than this. I've seen Peyton Watson be better than this. I have definitely seen Jamal Murray be better than this. They have not seen the best of any of those guys, and they managed to lose this game. Like, this was the winnable game for the I was going to say the Raptors, the Lakers. Like, this was a winnable game. Like, the Lakers and the Sixers, the road team in both situations. I think you can make a case that both teams could have stolen one on the road today. But it came down to composure, role players, defense, and experience. Really, these are the factors that are determining these series, in my opinion, in these games. In the case of, culture, right? Like, think about it. Like, which teams would you identify as being the teams that are really together right now? Apart from the Magic, who I think are incredibly together, but are just severely outmatched and out-talented in that Cleveland series. You can make an argument that the more together team, the more, consistently team chemistry, kumbaya team, the team that plays together better, the team that shares the ball a little bit more, the team that has a more egalitarian sort of focus of their offense, is less me, you type of offense. You could argue that team won all 3 games other than, the Cleveland Orlando game. You could also argue that the team that, won the margins won those games. Like, the team that just kind of like out hustled kind of won those games. You could argue the team that had the role players that stepped up won those games, right? Again, when it comes down to discussing the Raptors championship, a lot is made of Pascal Siakam and Kawhi Leonard. Not enough is made of Danny Green, Norman Powell, Fred VanVleet. Maybe a lot is made of Fred VanVleet because of the finals vote. Marc Gasol. Like, these are the guys, Serge Ibaka. Like, these are the guys that win you a championship, and these are the guys that the Raptors need to go out and find right now, because Bruce Brown ain't it. Probably not. I mean, he could be it. Who knows? I mean, he was it last year for the Denver Nuggets. He was their unsung hero. And I think that is going to come down to that. But also, it was really interesting watching certain players operate, and how I was trying to imagine how a guy like RJ Barrett or Manning Quickly or Scotty Barnes might be in those situations. So you see, how the Magic are running their offense through Paolo, and you're like, let me just imagine what that entire play would look like if it was Scotty instead of Paolo there. Or, you see Jamal Murray kind of shredding the defense, or even because Jamal Murray because RJ Barrett and DeMar DeRozan have been compared so frequently, you sometimes see like some of the things that DeMar struggles with, like, would RJ struggle in that similar situation, etc. I actually found it sort of hilarious the other day. I was thinking a lot about the Raptors and the We the North era, and like how this whole thing started behind DeMar and Kyle. And I was like, man, DeMar and Kyle have a lot in common with Scotty and RJ. So Scotty and RJ are bigger, younger, bigger, better at a younger age, and interestingly enough, like, could be way better, like a way better version of what that duo did. So that'll be interesting. I don't know. Let's take a look at some of the comments here. Um, Bert, I'm always blown away by the free throw differential in Lakers games. Folks say it's because of their game style. Is that cap or fact? Um, I think it's fact. So the Lakers are not a very foul prone team. Philosophically, they just don't foul a lot. So that helps, right? On the other hand, they have players who are very, very good at baiting for fouls. So you combine those two things, you're probably going to get a free throw differential. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe like there's some sort of league-wide conspiracy to get the Lakers more, calls. I think you could probably look at the history of the Lakers and probably find that this trend has not always held true. Um, but yeah, the Lakers have tended to have stars throughout the years. Stars tend to get more calls. Makes sense. Um, Denver's role players are better. Yes. Boost D'Angelo Russell's stats by featuring him and move him for picks in 2025. Denver is vulnerable without Bruce Brown. Jokes. That's funny. Denver got 6 fouls. Um, Jakob Poeltl for the Lakers 2024 pick, Jalen Hood Schifino, and D'Angelo Russell. How does that make you better? Um, I wish Vanderbilt was playing. So do I. He might, like he is a very, very underrated and good player, but probably complicates their offense a little bit as well. Also, shout outs to Yuta Watanabe, who is low key retiring from the NBA and will be playing in Japan from now on. Should be interesting, and I'll definitely like to watch one of his games over in Japan if we can. Um, Michael Porter Jr. showed what he is made of tonight. He kept his focus, played very good defense, and scored as much as needed. Was Jonte Porter sentenced? Holy shit. What? No. Don't say that. Oh, you're talking about his brother Coben. Yes. Coben was sentenced to 6 years in prison for a deadly DUI. Yes. I was shocked that I thought you meant Jonte Porter was also sentenced, in which case I would be freaking out by that. But yeah. Um have you scouted Justin Edwards? No, I have not. Um, Raptors rebuilding, so taking picks is good. It's not about being better, trying to get the 2025 pick. Yeah, I don't believe, Tony, I don't believe in this, you know, um, acquire a whole bunch of useless picks and then, um, building through the draft stuff. Like I understand, like, um, you need to like, I understand a lot. Okay, let's end this live on a couple of topics. Let's just clear this off and let's talk Toronto Raptors at the 113 mark. Two things. Number one, ran a Twitter poll about Gary Trent Jr. and what his market value was for the Raptors. I'll show you guys that right now, and I think that was kind of crazy actually, what that came up to be. Um, so the poll was basically asking you guys what he is worth, and I gotta say it's wild to me that people voted the way they voted. Hang on one second. Just pull this up, pull this up, pull this up. Also, this is me being very prophetic here. I said the Pelicans drill despite missing layups, crazy turnovers, uneven refereeing. They're just better. Hope for the Kings' sake, they don't wake up. And that was when the Pelicans were down. And I was just like, the Kings are losing this freaking game. Um, Also, shout outs to one of my favorite Raptors of all time, DeLon Wright. That was an underrated part of that Bulls Heat game. He came in and he turned that game around. 3 possessions. It's so interesting how him coming in for the Heat and Andre Drummond coming in for the Bulls had the opposite effect. And it's so interesting because the analytics love DeLon Wright, and they always have, and for good reason because he does shit like that. Okay, so I ran the poll. What's a fair contract for Gary Trent Jr.? Thankfully, 37.4% of people at the very least voted for 26 over 2. Personally, I think 26 over 2 might be a little bit of an overpay, but I think that's probably realistic. But yo, 12.2% of you think he's worth $20 million. What the fuck are you on? No, he's not. No, he's not. He is not dynamic enough, good enough at anything to warrant that kind of money. I really don't understand this at all. Bert saying 22 million over 3 years. Yeah, that would be a dream. That's under $8 million a year. That not happening, but that would be great. But I was just shocked. A lot has been made of Masai Ujiri's presser. A lot of people have interpreted it. I haven't necessarily listened to all the interpretations. Frankly, I'm just very, very thankful that my interpretation got the most views. Humble brag there. Thank you guys for that. I really appreciate it. But a lot of people have made videos talking about what Masai meant going one place, another place. Are they going to tank long term? What did what did Michael Grange's comment mean? Was he trying to bait him into admitting that he's going to tank, et cetera, et cetera? Look, I just want to be firm about this. The Raptors are not tanking next year. I don't care how good you think Cooper Flag is. They're not going to tank. They're walking into next season with a full intent to be competitive. If at the offseason, if at the midseason mark they're like, I don't know, 8 games under 500, expect them to probably tank. But I don't think they're going to be that bad. I really don't. And I think if you're expecting this to be bad next year, you're going to be disappointed. They're not going to be bad next year. They are fully going to be in the play-in or the playoffs. Like, I'm telling you, like, I just say, like, intent to be competitive but losing is a reality. I just don't think so, Choni. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I just think your team is too good to be what you think they're going to be. Scotty himself he's too good a player to be on a 20-win team or a 25-win team or whatever you need to tank to get to Cooper Flag. And if you thought tanking was bad this year in a weak draft, imagine what it's going to be next year with teams like Washington, Detroit probably tearing down, Charlotte shutting down guys midway. Like, you're going to see a lot of teams just try to bottom out, and you're not going to be able to catch them. You just have too much talent here. Jakob Pertl, if he's healthy, RJ Barrett, if he grows, like, you just have too much. I'm sorry. There's just too many good players here. Go watch so much basketball. I'm telling you, the Raptors are on par with a lot of these teams. It just so happens that your superstar, ascending superstar, Scotty Barnes, is just not as hyped or as talked about as other guys like Jalen Brunson. But, it's interesting. I was thinking about, the players that I really wouldn't want to be building around. I wouldn't want to be building around Jalen Brunson, personally. I wouldn't really want to be building a team around Joel Embiid, even though in this very same live, I have called him the most talented player in the league. I wouldn't necessarily want to be playing around a guy who I have questions about his leadership this far into his career, questions about his durability, questions about his mental stability, questions about his maturity. I wouldn't want to be building around a player like that. And with Jalen Brunson, who's basically 5'11", as much as he is a really, really solid play finisher and whatever, you see against length, like, sometimes he does struggle. It's just the physics of it. Now he's gonna have a big game in this series, I'm sure of it. But I just don't want a player who can be stopped in that sense to be the player I'm building around, And in that sense, you do talk, you start, and I wouldn't want to be building around Paolo Banchero. I really wouldn't, and I wouldn't want to be building around Pascal Siakam, and I wouldn't want to be building around LaMelo Ball. So really, when you start going down the league and you start talking about guys you actually want to be building around, you notice very quickly that Scotty shows up within the first 15 to 16 names. And if you're very high on Scotty, which I am, then he shows up within the first 8 to 9 names, which is like, great. You do have that one piece. Now, how do you get pieces to work around him, and how do you get those pieces to accelerate their growth? And I think they're going to do that this offseason, man. I think they have a plan. I think they're going to really start to implement their defensive identity going into next season. I think RJ Barrett and Scotty Barnes are really going to take that end of the court seriously now. And when winning is on the table and training camp is on the table, and you have a chance to really, really set in some of your defensive principles because your offense really it started to click. We saw it with Scotty and RJ and whatever. They'll have an entire offseason to really hone in that offense and sophisticate it a little bit and get everyone like really clicking together and learning to play with each other. And you're gonna have that continuity advantage that you just didn't have this year with all the shuffling lineups. And then you start talking about like implementing a defense and getting Scotty and Jakob back. I'm sorry, like you really have to give some credit to this team. They're not the bums that you think they are. They're not the Charlotte Hornets. Like as much as you might be high on LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, like I'm sorry, those guys are not going to be able to bridge the gap between the talent here. And the Raptors, of course, have a long way to go. Like this is not a done product. There's like 5, 6 pieces here, and then there's like 5 variables. Just hit on 3, and you're going to be like minimum 8 seed next year. Hit on 5, you could go up to 3. Hit on none, you're going to be like battling for 10th. Why would you not want to build around Paolo Banchero? General question. I just don't think he sees the game well enough. I don't think he's efficient enough as an offensive player. I don't really love him as an athlete. Find him to be a bit of a foul merchant, and I feel like in a league that is increasingly going to be less favored, less favorable towards guys who try to draw a lot of fouls and like, kind of get more into the physicality of the game. Like look at the final scores today. You know, like that was one of the most interesting things to observe, right? Like how many teams cracked 120 today? Minnesota was the only team today that hit 120, right? I mean, Orlando, Cleveland, 97-83. Like 3 of the 6 teams that played today did not crack 100 points. Like we're really going away from like what the NBA was a few years ago. And even Miami, Chicago, we had a team in the 90s, 91. The Chicago Bulls had 91 points. The Sacramento Kings scored 98 points. Like, when's the last time you saw this many teams score in the 90s and 80s? It's been a while, hasn't it? So that's what I'm saying. Like, you start to, like, I'm not even saying that Scotty's like some perfect player to build around. He's not perfect. I just think that his athleticism and the way he reads the game makes him way more likely to be a player that can develop into that type of, heliocentric hub that I just don't think Paolo is going to get there. Um, yeah, I just don't agree, and that's cool. I haven't generally agreed with most of your comments for the last few weeks, so it's just probably we just don't see the game the same way, Tony. Um, Raps need at least one more starter when they will make that decision is up in the air. I agree with that. Yeah, like I think you could. So it's Scotty, RJ, Emmanuel Quickly, and Jakob Poeltl. Those are your 4 starters penciled in for next year, and then you have like this giant matzo ball of like a variable in the middle, and it's not going to be Gary Trent Jr. But it would be helpful if it is a Gary Trent Jr. like player with more length, more size, more shot creation ability, more passing. What I thought interesting about the Denver Nuggets was how many different places they could initiate their offense from. You saw, Michael Porter Jr. Bring the ball up. You saw Jamal Murray bring the ball up all the time. You saw Nikola Jokic and Aaron Gordon being able to initiate the offense. They all have guard skills, which is amazing, right? Their entire team is full of guys who have guard, wing, and big skills, right? Jamal Murray, commendable, fronting Anthony Davis a couple times, providing a little bit of defense. He's not known as a defender, but he's big. Jokic, like there's a beautiful video by Thinking Basketball that came out today on how Nikola Jokic survives defensively. He's just big. He's big and he's smart. Being big and smart really helps you defensively because you can never be as much of a liability as someone who's small and not engaged. Like a guy like Damian Lillard is going to get killed defensively. He's going to give up so much offensive, firepower to the Indiana Pacers tomorrow. Like I would not be shocked if the Milwaukee Bucks get blown out tomorrow. I'm not sure how much I trust the Indiana Pacers right now. I just want to be clear about that. I'm not really sure. Looking forward to tomorrow. Like maybe we should just talk about that. Tomorrow's games. So let's see here. So tomorrow will be Miami Boston to start out at 1 p.m. That should be interesting, rather uneventful game. 3:30 we have Dallas versus LA, the Los Angeles Clippers. I'm not really sure who you probably favor in that series, but I would be very inclined to say that Dallas is going to win that series. I'm just not sure if they're going to steal game one or game two on the road. But wait, yeah. Um, I'm not sure, but I think with Kawhi's status up in the air, I think it's just going to be yeah, like so and New Orleans versus OKC, like could you see New Orleans upsetting OKC? Like I'm just wondering which road team is most likely to upset which home team. Obviously, the most likely is Indiana to upset Milwaukee. And I think without Giannis, that series might actually favor Indiana significantly. That being said, could Damian Lillard, Brook Lopez, like is there a chance that not running your offense through, you know, not running your offense through Giannis might become a blessing? Like, could a Bobby Portis provide enough? Could a Pascal Siakam and his playoff demons show up? Could a Tyrese Halliburton, who hasn't had a ton of playoff experience, could he, potentially just have a shit the bed kind of game? He hasn't been super healthy, he hasn't been himself. The Pacers, they have a lot of variables too. I'm not penciling the Pacers in. Like, they were one of my least favorite teams. They did show a little bit towards the end of the season, but I don't think like they were playing their best basketball towards the end of the season. So Damian Lillard is washed. Oh man. Yeah. I don't know if you're a real person, but if you are, I just want to sincerely offer some, advice to you. Um, I think you should, like, I really don't think you understand basketball as well as you think you do. I mean, that's just my opinion. But like some of the stuff you say is like really, really out there. You probably realize I don't respond to your comments. Like, you leave comment after comment after comment every single day. And I'm not trying to be rude. I just don't respond to it because I think it's pretty much nonsense. Damian Lillard is washed is pretty nonsense to me. Like, it's a pretty nonsense like type of conversation. Um, he's still like, like who are we talking about, bro? In terms of shot quality, he's in the 96th percentile. In terms of free throw rate, he's in the 90th percentile. In terms of load, he's in the 96th percentile. In terms of creation, he's in the 96th percentile. I heard someone say the other day that Damian Lillard is a worse player than Jalen Brunson, which is like probably true. But also, like, the way they said it was like talking like you, which is that Damian Lillard is washed. Personally, I think that's crazy. I don't think Damian Lillard is washed at all. I just don't think that he is. I don't think he's like a top 10 player in the NBA, but he's firmly a top 20 player in the NBA. Even with his defensive liability and woes, like, there's a reason why the entire league wanted him. There's a reason why the Raptors wanted him. He's a really good player. Like, I'm looking forward to him having like a really dominant series and maybe even like, putting the Pacers away and for people to start putting some respect on the guy's name. Now, I understand he's not a perfect player, and I understand his defense has been, much ado over like, like what has gone wrong with his defense. But he's gotten a lot better throughout the season. I don't think he's gotten enough credit for that. He started the season out as like a fourth percentile or fifth percentile type of defender, and he wound up being a 25th percentile defender. How good a defender do you think DeMar DeRozan is? Like, I don't see him being chastised for his defense. Like, he's pretty bad defensively too, right? A lot of these stars are pretty bad defensively. Tyrese Halliburton is a much worse defender than Damian Lillard, in my opinion. You know, so I think they're both really bad defenders. Is what I'm saying. Tyrese is like bigger defender, so I guess like maybe he gets some credit for that. I don't think Tyrese Halliburton's a good defender. I don't think D'Angelo Russell's a good defender. There's a lot of really bad defenders in the NBA. I just think like Damian Lillard is getting like, a lot has been made of his performance this year not being very, very good. And I'm just saying, like, I get it. I definitely get it. Um, but to say a guy is washed because he's had a down year, like, I don't think he's washed at all. Um, he was still a positive 3.4 box plus minus, offensive box plus minus. Like, I think it's a far cry from what he was last year for the Blazers, which is a positive 8.3, But yo, like last year, he was playing like a borderline MVP. So yeah, he's washed compared to MVP Damian Lillard from last year, you know. But I also think like it does not help him to play with some of the players he's playing with. Like, I think there's something off with the synergy in Boston and in Milwaukee. So I'm not suggesting the Milwaukee Bucks move off of him. I'm not suggesting he's unhappy. There's probably a lot. If not, there's definitely a lot going on in his personal life that has been talked about. But to say a guy's washed, I mean, someone who works as hard as Dame, someone who's as good as him, someone who's a top 75 player of all time. This is not a Klay Thompson situation in which like the notable drop off is like, oh my God, he's a liability out there. I think maybe you and I just have a completely different interpretation of what the word washed means. You know, it would be like saying DeMar is washed. He's not washed. He's a really good player. Um, Speaking of really good players, CJ McCollum, kind of low key, really, really good player. It's just funny. People don't talk enough about it, but I think, yeah. Dame fit to me is similar to Kyrie with Dallas last year. I think him and Giannis will be better together next season. I'm not sure if their aging roster can manage to keep that window open. So in fairness, like not Donald Fagan, I don't think Kyrie and Luka really struggled last year. It was everything around them that struggled. So yeah, I don't think Lillard is going to carry Bucks to a win in series. Does that mean that you don't think that you think the Bucks are going to get swept? Bet money they won't get swept. I don't think they're going to get swept, dude. I don't think they're going to get swept. Rob, have you put up a poll asking who the Raptor fans are cheering for in these playoffs? I have not. We'll wait for a live where there's more people. 125 people does not a great poll make. But maybe I can do one on Twitter. Seems to be quite a bit of engagement on that, or maybe on Instagram, which seems to be like our most engaged platform these days. If you're not following Pinsari Basketball on Instagram, it is just search Pinsari Basketball on Instagram. Pinsari, I think it's Pinsari Basketball, all one word, and then on Twitter, it's Pinsari B-Ball on Twitter. If you want my thoughts in other formats, yeah. Overall, yeah, it was an interesting day of hoops. It was really cool to watch all these games. I realize sometimes how cool this is. You know, if I could tell 12, 13-year-old Robert that one day you would get to watch basketball all day and it would be part of your job and what you're building, I think I would be like, no way, get the fuck out of here. There's no way you're that lucky. So I just sometimes have to pinch myself and just say, thank God for this channel. And thank you to this community. And thank you for the generous super chat. And thank you to all of you who've always supported this channel, even through a droughty kind of Raptor year. It means a lot. And also, like, some of you have asked, some of you actually showed up to the Wednesday screening. It went really well for J2 Mamère, the French film that we exhibited as part of Canada Film Day. It went really cool. And then the next few days were just spent, frankly, eBay obsessing, learning about eBay auctions and video games, and yeah, building up an N64 collection again. Just don't ask. Don't ask. It's friggin' weird. Yeah, but finding cool deals. And tomorrow I'm going so like tomorrow, like Facebook Marketplace yielded some really good deals. Unfortunately, I ended up spending close to $75 getting 3 of my favorite childhood games back, which was Star Fox 64, Cruis'n USA, and Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. Star Wars Shadows of the Empire, really trash game, by the way. Sparkling saying, what's your favorite N64 game? Good question. So it's probably Star Fox 64, but low key, like I know that no one likes this game, or almost no one likes this game, but I really liked Duke Nukem Zero Hour. And partially I like Duke Nukem Zero Hour because I think it was the last game that my dad bought me. And I just really valued it for that reason. Also, like it was an M game, you know, like on the N64, mature games were not usually made on the N64. It's typically a PS1 thing. Celtics won't beat the Nuggets, in my opinion. I think the Celtics can beat the Nuggets. I just doubt that they would. Mine has to be Ocarina of Time. Yeah, most people would say that, but you know what's crazy? I've had Ocarina of Time for 12 years, and I've never played it. I've never beat it. I've never played it through. I've never found the patience. I know one day I will. I'm sure I will. What's interesting is so my situation with with the N64. I'll end this live as I often do on a personal story. So I didn't have a video game system for the longest time because we grew up really poor, right? And I complained about it a lot. And then one Christmas, my grandparents were visiting from Europe, and then my dad had visitation rights at the time, and so basically, long story short, they asked me like what I want, and I said I really, really want an N64 because I had been lying that I had one for the longest time, and I was dying like to. I just didn't want all my friends to find out that I was this poor kid who didn't have any video games, which is so stupid now when I think about it. Like today, I would just be like, I don't have it, I don't have it. But back then, there was like an ostracization process where everyone's just like, I have an N64. My parents bought me a PS1, and then you're just like, my parents didn't love me enough to buy me video games, and so, yeah, there was like this weird social component to like how much video games and Pogs and Pokemon and all these sort of things, like what you had determined like your social status in school sometimes. Isn't that stupid? Like sometimes when I think about it, when I think back on things like, shouldn't who you are matter? I don't mean to sound crazy, but like it should matter. But unfortunately, what mattered back then was what car your parents drove, how big your house was, whether you had a pool, and very often what video games you had, and how much people wanted to come over to your house to play your fucking video games. And so, obviously, the kid who got NWO WCW NWO Revenge first was going to be the guy who everyone wanted to go over to their house and play their video games, and that's the one that everyone was nicer to at school. So it's just a very stupid transactional way to be friends. But anyways, I coerced my grandparents to purchase an N64, and with the N64 came a Star Fox 64, and that was my first ever game. Hold on one second. We gotta do show and tell. One sec. Pull Okay, let's do this. Okay, so one of the games that I would really play at my friend's house was this game, WCW NWO Revenge, which anyways, let me just talk about the game that I'm actually talking about. Where is it? 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 God, the labels on these games were so trash, and no one ever, because Nintendo boxed all their freaking games in a cardboard container. Hold on one second. I gotta find this. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Anyways, the reason I fell in love with the N64 was because we went to my cousin's house one day, and we played GoldenEye, this game right here. If y'all remember this game, and I was hooked. We played for 6 hours. I wasn't like one of those kids who grew up with video games in my house. I was one of those kids who unfortunately grew up with books. So I spent my time reading when I was a kid. But yeah, so this was the first game that I ever got. This is a Star Fox 64. I just repurchased it the other day. So, and I paid $37 for it like an asshole. And I just found it on Facebook Marketplace for 20 bucks. So I'm picking up a second copy tomorrow. Go figure. Anyways, so that's the game that came with my N64, and my mom had this crazy rule where I couldn't play video games for more than 1 hour every single week because she felt that it would rot my brain or my mind or my eyes or something. So, long story short, I would try to sneak, I try to find wherever she had hidden them so I could play these games, because at 1 hour a week, with the fact that I wasn't very good at video games to begin with, I was never going to beat these games. Long story short, that rule subsisted for about 2 years. So I really learned to cherish video games, weirdly enough, because one, I had very few of them. Later on, when I started working and I had my own job and games became cheaper and used games and whatever, you could just purchase like 7 games in one go to the EB Games. You could just go and get like 7 games, 8 games, and then you barely ever played them. But back then, I had this one game and I had it for like 2.5 months until a birthday, Christmas, or random gift came about. So you just had to play the fuck out of that game, and you had 1 hour a week to play that game. So like on Tuesday, I'm like, oh my God, tomorrow's my Star Fox day. And man, if you died in one of those games, oh my God, it was like your whole week was ruined. So I really appreciated the fact that my mom made me so disciplined. But anyways, the second game that I got on the Nintendo 64 was this game, which was a gift from my aunt, and that was Mario Kart 64. Um, Interesting that I became very good at this, and my mom and I actually played that game. The third game that I got was actually a gift from my mom, and that was sorry, it was also a gift from my aunt. This was Top Gear Rally. Not a great game at all, but I do have a favorable memory, which is that that's the only game that my mom ever played with me. And for those of you who are new to this channel, my parents are both dead, so the N64 is weirdly like the only system that has any connection to my parents at all, because my grandparents are also passed away, the ones who bought the N64. So weirdly enough, this is a very nostalgic system for me. Um, the next game I got was Super Mario 64, and Super Mario 64 was awesome as a platformer, and it was like the quintessential release title for the N64 when it came out. A lot of people had it, a lot of people loved it. I thought it was an incredible game. I actually never had Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong, and I didn't realize Donkey Kong requires an expansion pack, but I did pick up a copy of Donkey Kong off of eBay, and I did pick up a copy of Diddy Kong, which is apparently better than Mario Kart, apparently, according to people. I've played it for like 5 minutes, and so I cannot confirm or deny, but I can tell you Mario Kart is full of way more memories, and my cousin Aaron can attest that I whooped her ass every time at Mario Kart. Then there was Perfect Dark, a game that I did not play as a kid and have just picked up because it's a part of every single package that you get on eBay. So voila. But I will. One day I will. Tariq asking, were you into WWF video games? So interestingly enough, WWF, No Mercy here, WWF. I wasn't super into WWF games. I was more into WCW games. So my favorite video game growing up, one of them was WCW NWO Revenge. But the first game that my mom bought me was a Christmas gift. And that is a game that I don't have yet, which is WCW NWO World Tour. Although I am the only bidder on this eBay auction. So that might be coming my way soon. Who is your favorite wrestler? Tariq's asking. I had a lot of favorite wrestlers. Kevin Nash was definitely one of my favorite wrestlers until I found out that he's a bit of an asshole. But he's still one of my favorite wrestlers. I really like Sting, especially like leading up into the Starcade. He was awesome. That entire storyline that they built up was really cool. In terms of WWF guys, I really like Bret Hart. He gave me his glasses once. Like the kids, he would give like the glasses to the kids. I had them, and I am dying to find out where the fuck they went. They were bent up to shit. I can only imagine what they would be worth as a collector's item. But yes, WCW NWO Revenge was one of my favorite games, and we played it all the time at my friend's house, and it was just a really, really cool time, and it's just such a well-constructed game. Then there was Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, which when it came out was like a rage, and everybody. Tariq saying, I was a big Eddie Guerrero fan. Yes, man, rest in peace. WrestleMania 2000, pretty iconic game there. I have a bid going on eBay for a 4-part wrestling auction. I think it includes Mayhem, which is a terrible game, by the way. I regretted buying that game the first time. I'm going to regret buying it the second time again. World Tour. There's like Mayhem, World Tour, Attitude, and I think it's another copy of No Mercy, but I can't remember what the other one was. It might be Attitude. I can't remember. And then there's, of course, the iconic Zelda. And then there's the game that I fell in love with the thing for the first time, which was GoldenEye. So yeah, so that's my very small but very quickly growing collection, which will soon include Wave Race 64 times 2, Mace: The Dark Ages, Paper Mario, Quake 2. I don't know. Gaming is cool. I like video games. I have a lot of video games. I have a ton of games on PS3, PS2, including a pretty rare, allegedly very rare now title called Silent Hill 4: The Room. A whole bunch of Silent Hill games. And I also have Fatal Frame 3. for the PS2, which is a pretty damn rare game. I don't know. I've been like learning a lot about collecting games lately, for the last couple of days, and it's unearthing like cool things. I don't know, man. Like I quit smoking, and I think I fundamentally became a slightly different person. It's weird how quitting smoking has included a whole bunch of other shifts in my life. I don't really. What was your favorite NBA Live game? By far, NBA Live 2000. I loved NBA Live 2000. I played that on the PC like all day, every day. I simmed NBA Live 2000 all the way up to like 2005. I also had, oh, you guys will appreciate this. Basketball games. Hold on. Let me pull myself off for a sec. I will be back in like 2 minutes. Man. Tariq saying, is that the one with Vince on the cover? No, actually. So, the one with Vince on the cover is ironically here. So I don't own a copy of NBA Live 2000, which I could very easily change because it is like literally in the dumpster bin of every single N64 collection. Um, but so here's one of the first basketball games I actually owned, which was with Allen Iverson on the cover, which was the Dreamcast, which was NBA 2K1. Big time NBA 2K1 fan. This game blew my mind when it came out. I was like, oh my God, Peja Stojakovic looks so real. Moving on in the trajectory of what before live games became total bullshit. Vince Carter on NBA Live 2004. And you know what's amazing? I actually have 2 copies of this game just because Vince was my favorite player back then, and he was on the cover. Unfortunately, neither copy is sealed because, like a good boy, I did not know to keep my fucking copies of games sealed. I will learn from that mistake going forward. But yeah, this was probably the best live game ever. Not my favorite, but it's by far the best, which was NBA Live 2005 for the Xbox. This game was awesome, partially because of the dunk contest, but just in general. But leave it to me that year to play 2K more. I was always a bigger 2K guy. I like the realism of 2K. I realized like a lot of people just preferred the arcadiness of NBA Live, but personally just preferred like, and honestly, it was like NBA 2K1 when I just became obsessed with team building. Like I used NBA 2K1, 2K2, 2K3, 2K5, 2K6, 2K7, 2K8. All 2K games have been a vehicle for me to work on my GM skills the whole way through. This is like 20 years. If I ever show up for an NBA job, my first credibility thing is going to be like pulling up my memory cards from like NBA 2K like 4 and being like, look at who I drafted in NBA 2K4. Here's my proof. Look at the timestamp. I'm kidding. But seriously, my point is like I've been obsessed with team building because of NBA games. Um, I think the one I played what a lot was 2K5 with Ben Wallace on it. Yeah, man. 2K5 was awesome. You know what sucked about 2K5 though? It's our first introduction of Rafael Arujo on the Raptors. That fucking sucked. That was depressing as fuck. Every time I played that game, I traded Rafael Arujo. No offense to Rafael Arujo. Not my favorite draft pick. Anyways, the last 20 minutes have been very not basketball related, but I just want to say thank you to this community and always subscribe, like all that good stuff. And yeah, looking forward to tomorrow, especially that Thunder game. I really like the Pelicans. I like the Thunder a lot. I expect the Thunder to win, but man, like I really like the Pelicans, bro. Like the Pelicans are like one of my favorite teams in the NBA. They have been for a long time. I love all their players. I like Brandon Ingram. I'm not a Zion hater. I don't love him, but I definitely don't mind him. I think Jonas Valanciunas can absolutely cremate um the OKC Thunder inside. Like he is a big, big dude. and they don't have anything inside. And if he doesn't have like, he really struggled against, Domantas Sabonis in terms of like this touch around the rim, like that game against the Sacramento Kings, which was a blowout, by the way, could have been even more of a blowout if Jonas Valanciunas just hit his layups. And so now I'm just thinking to myself, like, shit, like, is that an upset that could actually happen? I'm not sleeping on the Thunder. I realize the Thunder are very good, but they are a very young team. And Mark Daigneault is a very good coach, but Willie Green is an incredible coach too. So I just want to say, like, in terms of like this playoffs, probably my favorite playoffs in terms of like what I've been looking forward to. This is probably like the playoffs that I've looked forward to the most as a basketball fan. And which is funny because it's following up like an NCAA, March Madness, which I really, really obsessed over, especially on the women's side, which was so cool to watch so much good basketball. And I just want to say, like, as a basketball fan, like, this is what you want. You want competitive series. You want, interesting series. You want series which exhibit like the growth of stars, the growth of team, the growth of concepts, the growth of, team basketball and things like that are just being done on a high level. You want competitive series. And I think Lakers Denver is about as competitive as a 2-7 series could be. If Jimmy Butler ever makes it back, I think the 1-8 series, even in on the East side, is competitive. It's not close. It's not going to be close. The Celtics are that good, but I think one of the most underrated parts of the play-in tournament, and this is just me speaking out loud. One of the things about the play-in tournament was like it got rid of one of two types of 8 seeds, right? So there are two types of 8 seeds, in my opinion: the falling 8 seed and the rising 8 seed, right? Usually, you don't want to face a rising 8 seed, which is like a team that figured it out in the second half of the season, either due to making a trade or getting a player back or, something like that, right? Like there's a very good chance. Like let's say for instance, like next year, right? Let's say for instance, the OKC Thunder start the season without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for like 50 games because I don't know, he's injured or he struggled. Touch wood. I hope he doesn't get injured, but just saying. And let's say they really, really struggle. Or let's use actually a player who was out this year, like John Morant, right? Like let's say John Morant faced a suspension, which he did for 25 games. And let's say he came back and then he got injured. But let's just say instead of getting injured for the whole season, let's say he got injured for like 12 games. And let's say at the same time, they started to slump and they were really struggling. But let's say in the second half of the season, like the first half of the season, they go like 10 and 30, right? Or 10 and 31. But in the second half of the season, they win like 33 games. You want to face that team as an 8 seed? Like, you know what I mean? Like, fuck. You do not want to face that team. That means the hottest team in the NBA, and they're going to be an 8 seed. That's the problem with the 42, 82 game season. It's very long, but it also like has no priority to how you started versus how you finished. The Raptors started 9 and 11. They finished with 25 wins. You know what I mean? So how bad were they for their final 62 games? Think about it. They were atrocious. They were like among the worst teams in the NBA. So what if you keep Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby until like, I don't know, trade deadline, and the Raptors were nowhere close. Point being, with the play-in tournament, typically like you give the chance for the team that is really falling off, like the Atlanta Hawks, to just fall out of the playoffs, right? And you give a chance to a rising team, even if they only rose as far as 10th, to at least have a chance. And while it makes it most interesting for teams down the stretch because, teams still have something to play for, and, maybe fans of an 11th seed or a 10th seed are like, hey, we still have the play-in. It does create more competitive balance. It also creates the potential for more upsets, in my opinion. Like one of the things that the NBA used to have was a shortened first round, which was 5 games. That always created this potential for upsets. And I'm not sure when the NBA decided to get, why the NBA decided to get rid of this, 5-game first round series, because it is very, I think, intuitive that a first round series would be less competitive. And so you'd have fewer games. But the NBA decided to turn that 5-game series into a 7-game series. And I do think that it has been needlessly taxing and kind of annoying for fans who just want to get to the second round and start talking about the contenders. but I also think that it has taken some of the randomness of upsets. And upsets are very exciting as much as they are devastating for the fan base that is upset. It's very exciting for the fan base that pulls off the upset. Like, I mean, you will forget a lot of teams in NBA history. Will you ever forget the We Believe Warriors? No. Why? Because they won a round against the top seeded Mavericks. You know what I mean? That's what makes it interesting. And so, SP, are the Thunder at a disadvantage because they have to wait longer to know their opponents? That is a really, really, really good point that I had not thought about prior to you mentioning it. That is a really good point. Anyone, I mean, in fairness, um, they're also at a disadvantage because they've been off basketball longer, right? Like the teams that you're playing, right? Like I just feel like the New Orleans Pelicans just played two really hard fought games. Okay. And Brandon Ingram is coming off an injury in which he was on a minutes restriction. These two games served as a massive tune up for him. Meanwhile, the OKC Thunder have just been sitting there and they didn't know who they were going to play. They didn't know if they were going to play Sacramento. They didn't know if they were going to play the Pelicans. They knew they were going to play one of those two teams, right? Or they didn't know they were going to play the Warriors, right? So that's three very different teams to try to prepare for. I mean, you could argue Sacramento, Warriors close, but Pelicans are very different beast. And yeah, like I think it does give a bit of a competitive advantage, especially to the Pelicans, because the Pelicans could have devoted like 2 to 3 of their staff members. But I do believe like they were probably full force scouting the Sacramento Kings, just to get out of the play-in. Um, so yeah, I mean, in theory, yes, the Pelicans have known longer that they would face the Warriors. Sorry, that they would face the Thunder, then the Thunder have known that they would face the Pelicans. But nevertheless, I do think that like we could see a 7-2 upset. Could we see a 7-2 upset on the East side? I don't think so. In terms of which team is most likely to be upset, obviously it is the Milwaukee Bucks, from the Indiana Pacers for sure. Let's just take a look very quickly at the playoff bracket again. I did have a playoff bracket, and I'm just curious to know how devastatingly shot my bracket is right now because I'm pretty sure it's already dead. Yeah, because I had the Bulls making it through. So yeah, I'm already shot to death, right? Um, but I have the Milwaukee Bucks beating the Pacers because I was under the impression that Giannis would come back. But now knowing that Giannis will not come back, there's a very good chance that the Pacers, as a 6-3, will upset that team. And the Heat, which are the 8th seed now without Jimmy Butler, really don't have a chance. But the 7 seed, which is the Sixers, they do have a chance to upset the Knicks. I believe that firmly. So the 7 seed Knicks do have a chance. Tariq, do you think this Scotty will ever be on the cover of 2K? Yes, but it is highly unlikely. I think it's going to be Wemby and Anthony Edwards changing places for a long time. So yeah, I mean, on the East side, there is a potential for 2 upsets, which is the 6-3 matchup and the 7-2 matchup are both potential upsets. Ironically, I think that the series that is most defined, other than the first one, is Cleveland Orlando, in which I think that I have Orlando making it for some stupid reason, but honestly, I don't. 3 days later, I have changed my mind completely. It's not just based on watching this game, it's just knowing the health status, and yeah, watching this game helped. And watching how badly Paolo struggled and realizing how much young teams struggle. There's a theory about, they say what are the key factors to being successful in the playoffs? Playoff experience. Playoff experience is a big one. Superstars, top 10 defense, top 10 offense. It just comes down to that. And I just feel like the Orlando Magic are missing two of those ingredients right now, which is the offense and, of course, the playoff experience. So they'll get some playoff experience, the much needed playoff experience here. Jonathan Isaac has some playoff experience. Nice to see him start at center. But they need some shooting. They need some offense. They don't need to double down more on defense. They need some offense. So very badly needed. But in terms of yeah, you could really, really see a Pelicans like if Zion comes back, I mean, you realize like what is Zion's health status? This is a good thing to kind of just Google that very quickly. Um, will he be available? Hold on, just pull this up from Sporting News. Is a injury. Um, I hate these articles, man. Like they're so spammy. Okay. Um, like stop it, man. Like just give me. Okay, so thanks. There's absolutely no information. The possibility Williamson will still need time to work himself up to game speed. There's also a possibility of reevaluation of the injury. Could okay, so great. There's a possibility for both. Like fuck you, Sporting News. Like fuck you to hell. Seriously. God, I hate these fucking articles like this. So no information. Isn't it strange the 7-8 play-in game in theory can be a conference finals preview? Um you mean Lakers Pelicans? Huh. Zion hamstring out 2 weeks. Is that confirmed? I mean, I haven't heard this, so like here. Okay. Sports Illustrated, can you be a little less spammy? Um, left hamstring is out for Friday's playing tournament and will be evaluated again in coming weeks. Huge blow for the New Orleans. Shit. Well, teams have no real obligation. Right. Pelicans injury report. Will be reevaluated in 2 weeks. Shit. I mean, reevaluated in 2 weeks. I mean, honestly, like, the game that he played against the Lakers, he was a negative 3 point something box plus minus. Not saying that's everything. He obviously scored a lot of points. I think they're just a better okay, I don't want to say that. They're not a better team without him. They're a different team without him. And I'm not really sure if that's better or worse, but I'm just saying like they're different and they're harder to stop. Like because I wouldn't say they're harder to stop. They just become very Zion focused without him. And I think they're better defensively without him. So like with Zion and Jonas Valanciunas, they're like a different type of difficult to match up with. But I do think like, damn, like Dyson plus Trey plus Herb is a lot of length. And that's a lot of length to put on a very young team that could be bothered by a lot of length. You know what I mean? Like when you break down like what the Thunder are, they are a very young team full of ascending stars, right? Jalen Williams has really never been tested in the playoffs. We just don't know. We've seen better players than him struggle in their first round of the playoffs. James Harden struggled in his first finals. And James Harden's a better player at that time. So I'm just saying, like, I'm not discounting the Thunder. I think they're a good team. I think they should be very much favored. But in terms of like typically like 8-1 matchups, typically there should be like it should be a sweep and I don't think it will be a sweep for the Thunder this year. I just don't. I think the increased parity around the league means that the gap between 8 and 1 just isn't as huge, especially in the West. In the East, it's enormous, but in the West, it's just not. There was no runaway, team in the West. It was like basically like a three-way tie for first place. There was a brief period of time where the Clippers were the number one team in the West. There's a lot of reasons to believe anyone could beat anyone. The Clippers could beat the Mavericks. The Mavericks could beat the Nuggets. Anyone can beat anyone. Like in the West, it's like, weirdly enough, the wild, wild West, In terms of just the win totals, just to talk this out for a second, the Pelicans had 49 wins. The Thunder had 57 wins. Right? Like, and in terms of an away record, just to paint this out, just hold on and pull this up. So here's the away record for the Thunder. They're 24-17, right? At away. And they're an incredible home team at 33-8. However, 28-14 away are the Pelicans. The Pelicans are the best road team in the West. And they're playing a team whose claim to fame is that they have home court advantage. See what I mean? So it's like, man, could the Pelicans do a "we believe Warriors" type of thing? Because there are a lot of people out there who do not believe in the Thunder right now. I'm one of them. I don't believe the Thunder have like a deep chance of going like all the way. I don't see finals in their future. I don't think anyone's picking them to make the finals. I think people are just expecting them to be competitive, in a second round series and hopefully, go to a game 7 and earn some playoff scars. It would not shock me if they end up in the Western Conference Finals and get beaten by the Denver Nuggets, but it would surprise the hell out of me if they ended up in the finals this year. So that's just me. And yeah, I'm just telling you, I think the Pelicans have a chance. I'm not saying it's a good chance. I'm just saying personnel wise, mentality wise, charisma wise with Jose Alvarado, that team has a chance. So anyways, that's it for me. It is nearly 3 a.m. Thanks a lot for those of you who tuned in. And yeah, I'm definitely rooting for Denver in this whole equation, by the way. But yeah, peace, guys. Have a good one. Barnes of Scotty saying, I feel like Indiana will upset Milwaukee. I feel that they will as well, but I just don't think that it will be as easy as people are making it. Anyway, peace, guys.